Hey, welcome to another episode of Clear Lake Connections, where we talk to the people behind the businesses of Barre, Houston, proudly sponsored by UTMB Health. Today's special guest is Alice Williams, and you are with UTMB Health. Tell us what department you're with exactly.
Thanks for having me today. I am with the UTMB Sealy Center on Aging. So that is, the center focuses on aging-related research. And we also collaborate with a lot of different departments across our campuses in bringing community education, supports for caregivers. We work closely with our geriatrics division at UTMB. So it's a very diverse group.
And I imagine business is growing quite rapidly. We've all heard about the demographic shift. And
Sure. With more people aging, living longer. But part of our focus is also how to help people not only live longer, but live better. So we're talking about things like health span versus just lifespan. That's a lot of the focus with, we have a new interim director in our department, and he's really bringing that to the forefront of how we approach things, how we talk about getting older.
I like hearing that, because I think modern medicine for so long has focused on quantity versus quality. So
Right.
Tell me a little bit more about how you guys are making that shift.
Well, in our research, for one, a lot of our research focuses on people with dementia of some kind and also their family caregivers. So there have been multiple studies over the years. We have one very long-term longitudinal study that focuses on the Mexican American population and the caregiving experience over decades for people with Alzheimer's and other dementia, for example. And we have several studies right now that are focused on the needs of caregivers who are caring for somebody who's in maybe early stage Alzheimer's or dementia, and how to address those needs as they change, sometimes how to detect that there's a change in a person's cognitive abilities and what to do about it. And we have interview studies. A lot of times we just want to talk to people about their personal journey, and we learn from that. Our researchers can glean all kinds of information that will help improve either direct care or maybe the services and supports for somebody that's out in the community.
Yeah, and that's such an important thing, because I've seen it firsthand with my father-in-law. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. And along that journey of him being the caregiver, the toll it took on him was tremendous. And in fact,
Yes.
they're both passed now, but you could just see this toll that it was taking, and his health started deteriorating way more rapidly than I think it would have otherwise. And it sounds like that's the type of situation you're trying to address.
Yes, a lot of times that's exactly what we're looking at, because as your own experience speaks to that, and that's the experience of many of the caregivers, especially when it's a spouse caring for, somebody with an advancing form of dementia.
And so what type of, what do you try to help them with? How do you try to get them to come around to maybe realizing, it's okay to ask for help, and at some point, it might be better if the care is given professionally.
Exactly. That's a tough conversation, but it's an important one. So one of the ways is through a caregiver support group that I lead. And that support group, I'm a trained facilitator through the Alzheimer's Association. But it's really, it gives people a safe, comfortable, private space to talk about what they need to talk about, because a lot of times there's still a lot of stigma around dementia and about how people feel about caring for somebody with dementia. So we give them a safe space to talk about that with other people that really understand. It's giving people a place to connect with folks that are, they're on a similar path. Nobody's dementia experience or Alzheimer's journey, whatever you want to call it, is the same. But the
there's a lot of uniqueness
caregivers,
there.
There's a lot of individual pathways there.
Yeah.
And it's the same for the caregiver. So depending on the relationship, the history of that person, the resources that they have available to them, their level of education and understanding of the disease. So part of it is educational.
Yeah.
And, the other biggest part is that letting people know they're not alone. It's a very isolating kind of disease for the person with the dementia, but also for their caregiver.
Yeah.
So we try to erase that stigma, educate people about this is what's happening. We can't tell exactly how it's going to go, but here are some coping skills, here's some resources. And then you mentioned also about when is it time, helping people navigate when is it time to get more help.
Yeah.
Especially for spouses.
If you can't take care of yourself, you cannot take it. It's
bingo.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't take care of anybody else if you can't. And a lot of times a way that I reach a caregiver in that situation is I tell them, what if something happens to you? If you work yourself down to the bone, you get sick, Lord forbid, you might pass away. Then what? What's going to happen to this person with the dementia that's left behind?
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes that kind of conversation for people to really internalize, here's what things I need to do.
But I like your format in that you're bringing people together instead of just as the professional kind of prescribing what to do. You're letting them connect so that, you're taking that approach where, they're going to learn from somebody else, and all I have to do is bring them together, and they'll figure it out together.
Exactly. And that's why they call a person like me a facilitator. That's really my role. Unless they're asking me specific questions, I really encourage them to engage with each other. I learn something new, if not multiple new tips and ideas and ways of thinking about things from these caregivers. Their wisdom is incredible.
You have any success stories that you can share from some of this process?
Well, success is relative.
Yeah.
These are all caregivers of somebody who has basically a terminal illness.
Yeah.
And so I think the success lies in when somebody can say, I got my life back when I reached out and asked for help. I'm thinking of one woman in my group in particular, and she went through the whole process of moving, her and her husband moving, coming closer to their children, moving into an independent retirement community. That didn't last long because he had advancing dementia, moving to an apartment with in-home help. But again, as he advanced, it became more difficult. He went through adult daycare, was one of their steps. And then when he was no longer able to go there, going to a nursing home.
Wow.
And then applying for Medicaid and for VA benefits. And now he has been very happily placed in a VA nursing home in the Pearland area. But his wife, through this whole thing, at first she was determined she was going to take care of him. Mm-hmm. And she could do it. But through the discussions in our support group and other people telling her, because she's very healthy, very active person, and she had stopped doing the things she enjoyed. Her quality of life was going downhill. And so now that she has found a place that she's at peace with, that he gets good care, it's 24-hour care, she says she has found herself again. She's got her life back. And she's moved into a new apartment. She put her little craft room back together that she had, left to the side for these years when she was caring for her husband. And her quality of life is so much better. And she goes and sees him every week.
Instead of having two people's lives kind of, it's a balance. Why do you think it's so hard for people to ask for help, caregivers, especially spouses?
Well, there's always, especially spouses, is the promise. Till death do us part. Mm-hmm. For people that have made that promise, especially, I shouldn't say especially, I think all generations, we take that promise very seriously.
Yeah.
This is somebody that I vowed to love forever. But I didn't bring Alzheimer's or, Lewy body disease into those vows. So, it's a very personal journey. Some people never really accept that it's not a limitation that they have. It's the reality of you're not meant to do that alone. And if you can get a team of people, whether it's paid help, other family members, friends, people do it all kinds of ways, there's a way to get through it.
Yeah.
And you're not deserting a person because you're not the one providing care. That's probably the biggest leap that caregivers have to make. What I tell them too is, especially somebody that has to move into 24-hour care, is now you can go back to being their husband or their daughter and not their caregiver. You can get your original relationship back because now there's other people in there to do all those things
They're
you
taking
really
care of the
don't.
hard work.
Right.
Yeah.
The bathing, helping somebody dress, helping them use the toilet. Those aren't things that when you marry somebody you're promising to do, so you get that relationship back by getting the right care.
So let's say I'm a caregiver and I feel like I'm struggling and I want to reach out to you. What does that look like?
So most people reach me by email, through my work email at UTMB. Do you want me to share that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's my email. It's Alice Williams at alwillia@utmb.edu. And and then what I do is help them understand. We meet, our support group meets twice a month. So we meet on the second and fourth Fridays. We meet at lunchtime. So for working caregivers, because that's a whole nother class of caregivers unto themselves, in addition to their relationships. So we meet from 12 to 1, and the Zoom option is available at both meetings.
Okay.
And then we offer an in-person option. It is in Galveston on the second Friday.
And where do you do lunch?
Well, we meet.
That's always important to me.
You can bring your lunch. We don't provide, sorry, but you can bring your lunch if that's your lunch hour. And we actually meet at the Ollie building. It's the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute building on the Galveston campus at 1200 Market Street. They provide us a space to meet. We have a large TV screen. And so people that Zoom in, we can all see each other and interact during the meeting. It works really well.
Good.
What we call a hybrid meeting.
Yeah.
And then on the fourth Friday, it's all Zoom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how we do it. So they can email me for the information, and then I send out a link. And, if people have trouble navigating Zoom, they can also phone in. You can meet from the telephone. I have a couple of caregivers that do that. They're not Zoom
They're not
savvy.
Zoomers, huh?
They're not Zoomers. No, but they can call in so they can still participate.
So you're very accommodating.
Yep. Try to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for somebody that first becomes a caregiver? They're brand new into it. Let's say it's a spouse. They just found out. What are the first few things you would want them to know that you think can really set the tone?
Number one, that they're not alone. That there are so many other people out there that also feel alone, but there are ways to find each other and to connect. Also to know that what they're seeing, what they're watching with their person that they love, it's real, it's really happening. It's hard sometimes because, dementia is not a visible disease. The exterior, the physical person looks the same. They say, but he's so strong, he still rides his bike, or he still swims. It's, you can't watch somebody's brain deteriorate.
Yeah.
So the other piece I say is educate yourself about whatever type of dementia it is, whether it's Alzheimer's, there's vascular dementia, there's Lewy body disease, but to get a really, at least basic understanding of what's happening in the brain, because these different dementias affect the brain differently, and you'll see different changes, patterns of behavior according to what the cause of the dementia is. So education is critical.
So it's always Alzheimer's, dementia. Alzheimer's is a specific form of dementia, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Are any of the other types of dementia, are there like treatments that are available to either improve or at least slow down the onset?
The eternal question. So right now for Alzheimer's, we don't have a cure. So these medications that are given are really given to help manage the behaviors. It's going to slow it down, so to speak. All it's doing is delaying the next level.
Yeah, it's like we notice with my mother-in-law, you're on a plateau and then it drops and then it's another plateau, and it's a continual.
Yeah.
Sometimes the plateaus are shorter, longer, but there's never
well, and again,
a rebound.
Well, it depends on the cause of the dementia. If it's vascular dementia and you control somebody's blood pressure, let's say, to prevent further brain damage or mini strokes or whatever it is that's causing it, then for people with that form of dementia, it might just stay at that certain point and not get worse. Okay. Because that's a more physical cause. It affects the brain, yes, but we know why. A lot of times with the medications are managing difficult behaviors, anxiety, because for the person who is experiencing the dementia, anxiety can be through the roof. I think about you losing control of your brain that operates everything you do. Mm-hmm. That would be an extremely anxiety-provoking situation. So that's sometimes what the doctors will address. Getting a good diagnosis does make a difference.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't want to just, sweep it under the rug and go, well, it's just dementia. If you can get some, go through the testing process and really understand what's causing those symptoms of dementia you see, the treatment can vary greatly and can make a big difference to both the person who has the dementia and the caregiver.
Well, I like what you said. This is happening, this is real, mm-hmm. and it's time to deal with it. Because I think with my father-in-law, he just denial, and I think we lost a good maybe 2-year head start on all of this.
That's very likely. It's also very common.
Yeah.
Understanding the difference between normal aging-related memory issues and those that aren't. The Alzheimer's Association has great resources on that.
Okay.
I'm also a community educator for them. So this is some of the things I do in the community too. And we have one program called the 10 Warning Signs. And here's what this looks like if it's probably early onset or early stage. And this is what if it's normal aging, and keeping it very, realistic.
Yeah. And it's National Caregiver Month, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, November is National Caregivers Month.
Okay.
Now, that's not just for caregivers of people with dementia, but all caregivers. Statistically, I'll throw out a number, but in the U.S., we have over 55 million caregivers.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of us, and we toss out our statistics sometimes just to show that if you're not a caregiver, you probably know somebody that is, okay? And what was it? Rosalind Carter, she had a quote. She said, there's 3 kinds of people, those who are caregivers, those who need caregivers, and I think those are going to be caregivers. None of us are going to get out of it in one way or another.
Yeah.
You know? So it's just it's a worldwide phenomena because people are living longer.
Yeah.
And, like Alzheimer's is really a disease of old age. So when we live longer and our bodies start giving out, we start needing more care. It's just the cycle of it. But that's where that health span expansion comes in.
No, and I like that because I do remember in one of my courses at college talking about how that's always been the big great debate in medicine is quantity versus quality.
Yes,
and
it
I
still
think
is.
It sounds like we're maybe coming around to the idea that quality is more important than quantity.
Well, it depends. Again, medicine is done, it's brought to us by people. Mm-hmm. So people's personal biases and beliefs are always going to, even though doctors take an oath and so on, and they do their best to honor what the patient's wishes are, mm-hmm. What their desires are, and follow what their beliefs and values are. But that's not always an easy road, but it's an important one.
So we've talked a lot about spouses being caregivers, mm-hmm. but what about, we've got multiple generations at home. It could be the kids taking care of grandparents. It could be mm-hmm. working parents. I mean, how does that change the dynamic of being a caregiver?
It actually changes a lot. I mentioned working caregivers earlier, and so that's typically, your younger, so to speak, generation. But when you are the daughter or son of somebody with special needs, or even you mentioned even a grandchild, sometimes it's a multi-generational caregiving group that is stepping in, and the family is typically where we start. Who's willing, who's able, who has the resources, the patience, the time, because caregiving becomes a 24/7 proposition at some point. So, families that are dealing with what we call that sandwich generation, you've got kids in school, you've got mom or dad maybe, living at home with you, you're working. This is where those folks are the ones that really need to reach out and get resources for navigating that situation, because it's very complex, dealing with kids, and you don't maybe want your kids to be a caregiver, but helping them. If you don't understand the disease that's happening, how can they? So if you share that kids are smart, they're resilient, They're creative and they're very naturally loving. And I've known high school, junior high and high school age kids that helped with some of the caregiving because they could and they wanted to.
Yeah.
And they wanted to be part of it. It was another expression of love. So I wouldn't, don't immediately exclude children if they're capable and willing to be part of that caring process. It can enrich everybody.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that too is when we talk about relationships is that, especially in dementia, because that's where I specialize, is that the person with dementia responds differently depending on the relationship to the person. So a daughter might be able to get her mother to take a bath where the spouse, the husband, it's a big no.
Yeah, you're absolutely. I've seen that play out.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So again, that's where having that multi-generational approach, sometimes you can overcome some of those barriers that pop up.
Well, it almost sounds like the more people get involved, the better. I mean,
yeah, that's your care team.
Yeah.
I mean, there's websites dedicated to managing care. One of them is called Share the Care. And so people have different assignments, maybe this daughter that says, I'm not cut out to be a caregiver. My job is this and this, but I can order Dine and Dash. I can cook dinner, twice a week. I can put frozen meals in the refrigerator. That's huge for somebody who's caring around the clock.
So the work you're doing, it's with UTMB, but it's for everybody, right? It's
Right.
Anybody can come and join one of these sessions, and
Yes.
it's a community service that you're
It
doing.
is. This has always been a group that's open to the community. We call it the Caregiver Connection. That's the name of the support group. There are many caregiver support groups throughout the United States, but in our area. And so all of them are open to anybody in the community in need. You don't have to be affiliated with UTMB. You just need to be somebody that needs to connect.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you
glad
for
to
all
be
you're
here.
doing in the community, and really
My pleasure.
making this, bringing this to the forefront.